Florida State heads into a game against Miami unranked, and Miami's at 13. Now, this game was originally supposed to happen about a month ago, but Hurricane Irma postponed it to week 6.
Yeah, it seems like it also kind of postponed any hopes of Florida State's winning another national championship this year. Ever since Hurricane Irma, Florida State has just been completely dismantled, both offensive and defensively. That game against Alabama did a lot of damage to them.
That it did, and the Hurricane, originally postponed this game because the game was originally in Miami and they had damage to deal with. But now Miami's coming into this game undefeated. What are some of the strengths they bring in, Griffin?
So some of the strengths of this Miami team is their just overall explosiveness. 10 of their top 11 receivers and their top 9 receivers overall average over 10 yards per reception. Also, all 3 of their running backs that have gotten any significant time this year average over 8 yards per carry, which both stats are just pretty amazing for any team, even in college football, which is one of the most explosive just levels of football. Their D-line is also going to be an extremely interesting to watch against this Florida State. It's going to be the best offensive line they've faced. While Florida State's offensive line has looked pretty weak this year, they do have a lot of 4- and 5-star recruits there, and it is something that, if their coaching is able to finally pick up a little bit, is something that should eventually, and hopefully this week, be an actual strength for Florida State, even though it hasn't been in weeks past. Overall, their defense is just very athletic. They're very quick, very fast. They don't have very many big guys. They're not exactly an extremely stout defense, especially when it comes to running the ball, as far as Miami is concerned. But they do have an extremely explosive and extremely athletic defensive line that wreaks havoc on other offensive lines, running games, and passing attacks.
Well, Florida State usually performs very well offensively, but that has not been the case this year. Most of their strengths are defensively this year. They have a great secondary, and you can expect Tavarius McFadden is going to defend the Miami wide receiver Amen Richards, who gained 106 yards off of 3 receptions against Duke. He's going to be the key to watch on the Miami offense. They also have a really strong blitz game, with Brian Burns and Derek Noddy combining for 7 tackles for loss. They're going to be exploiting that offensive line for Miami and trying to sack the quarterback. Their special teams is also looking pretty good. Two of their top kickoff returners average more than 30 yards per return.
Yeah, that Florida State special teams has really been looking pretty impressive this year. They've been extremely explosive. Their leading returners averaging just over 43 yards per return on kickoffs, which allows for great field position, which in a game like this where field position could come down to who wins and loses the game could be extremely important.
It could, but will the freshman quarterback be able to utilize that advantage?
That's something that we're all going to have to wonder until he finally does, but it doesn't seem like this is going to be the week in which he finally utilizes the abilities and even some of the flashes that he's shown, but still inconsistent throughout the few weeks that he's played. Even in high school, he wasn't exactly the best quarterback, especially not for Florida State recruiting standards. He was only a 3-star recruit. Florida State, James Blackman, as we were just talking about, only has 399 passing yards this season. I do realize he hasn't started all of the games, and especially one of them being against Alabama. That is to be expected, and he does only have 2 starts under his belt so far. But he's also only completing 55% of his passes, which in college football, in this era, in a pass-heavy era of football, that's pretty low. The receivers get a lot of penalties called against them, especially on those deep routes, which Florida State has plenty of weapons on the outside to throw those balls to. He's just not getting it done. Their running game and their offensive line hasn't been helping them at all this year. Their offensive line, people were expecting it to be improved from last year. They're returning their starting center. He's almost seemed to digress. He doesn't seem like he's really improved at all. Their offensive line in general has just been riddled with holes. Alabama obviously exploited that significantly, something that while DeAndre Francois was playing, was able to escape from a little bit with his elusivity. Their current quarterback and true freshman James Blackman has not been able to do that so far this year against weaker defensive lines. And since the defensive line of Miami is such a strength and so athletic, I think Florida State's really going to struggle with that.
And where Miami struggles on defense is in passing. And so they shouldn't really have a problem with Florida State because James Blackman hasn't effectively utilized the wide receiving core he has.
Oh, yeah.
But they allow 246 yards per game on average. But their offensive line is where I'm concerned. They usually do a pretty good job, but they struggle against the more athletic teams. Florida State would definitely qualify as one of the more athletic defenses they're going to face. And the strength of schedule in this Miami team is just kind of pitiful. They only have Virginia Tech looming on the horizon as the top 25 team they're looking to play this season. So not the best strength of schedule, but will it be enough to get Florida State? Probably. Who's your key Miami player for this game?
My key Miami player for this game is defensive end Joe Jackson. He's been pivotal this year for the Miami defensive line in getting pressure on the quarterbacks and trying to solve a lot of their secondary issues with having other teams' quarterbacks just get rid of the ball quickly or just throw it away because he's constantly in their face. He's only averaging 2.5 sacks, but if you look at the number of times that he's put pressure on the quarterback knockdowns, and quarterback hits, he's one of the top in all of college football. I really look towards him to try and mend the Miami secondary, even though he's a defensive lineman, and against a true freshman quarterback in James Blackman, who's already shown signs of being a little scattery and quick to throw the ball away. I think he'll be pivotal for this Miami defense.
For FSU, my key player this game is going to be Derwin James. He's done a lot of developing. He was injured last season, but he's still shown some great growth from his freshman season. He has 18 total tackles, 2 of those for loss so far, and he's very versatile. He can line up anywhere on the defensive line and pretty much play any defensive position they need.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see. They haven't used him much on offense this year, but they might even have to throw him in on offense to kickstart something.
Who do you like?
In this game, I'm going to have to say Miami. Florida State just hasn't seemed like themselves, especially after that week 1 loss to Alabama, and after Hurricane Irma and having that bye week, it really did not seem to help them at all. I really look for Miami to take advantage of that and make this a pretty big statement win for them this season.
I have to agree with that. Miami always plays Florida State tough, and if there's a time, the time is now. Florida State just looks pitiful. Alabama was an understandable loss, but I had expected them to keep it closer. It does stink that their quarterback, Deondre Francois, is out for the season, but sometimes that's what happens. And James Blackman, I think, is a good player. We're going to see him develop a lot throughout the next 6 weeks, but the time is not now for him.
Yeah, he'll have to if they have any hopes of even just a basic bowl game. As a true freshman quarterback being thrown in there against some of the top defenses in college football, it'll be tough for him.
Thanks for watching RedZone to EndZone. I'm Janae Muchmore, joined by special guest
Griffin Parkrose.
And don't forget to follow us on Facebook and Twitter. The social links are below. And be sure to check out our other games this week on the right-hand side of your screen. Have a great night.
Have a good night, guys.